And next up, we have an amazing panel, and we actually were lucky enough to have the moderator deliver a keynote on this very stage yesterday. She works for Salesforce, and she is the chief evangelist. So I hope that you guys enjoy this, because it's going to be amazing. And it's about one of the most important things that we'll do, selling to the digital native. So please welcome my friend Tiffani from Salesforce, who's going to be the moderator. And if the panelists can also come to the stage, please. Thank you.
Quiet today. Thanks. Have a seat. Anywhere you like. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Selling to the Digital Native. My name is Tiffani Bova. I'm the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. And I have a wonderful panel here with me today. I think you're going to get some great insights you can take back to work this week. But I'm not going to make the introductions because I always tend to butcher them. So I'm going to let you guys do it. But because you're sitting next to me, you're going to go last. I'm going to start over there. Why don't you introduce yourself and give a little snippet as to what brought you to the stage here today.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Parin Metha. I look after experiences at Airbnb. So at Airbnb, we believe the thing that we're providing to people is the trip. And obviously, a core part of that all of you might know is the home that you provide. But also, there's other things that people do on their trips, such as experiences, maybe attend concerts, maybe do a restaurant booking. And so we're currently building out that business in Asia Pacific. And what brought me here is curiosity, to learn from other people.
Excellent. All right.
Hi, everybody. My name is King. I represent Saltycustoms. We are a tech merchandising company. What we do is we help companies and individuals make money online by selling merchandise. So the funny thing about it is we started as t-shirt printers about 8 years ago. And since then, we've sold over 3 million shirts across the globe. And now we are manufacturing merchandise. We allow people to design and also sell it. And we'll handle the fulfillment and the entire supply chain management in the back end. And the money goes to them, profits.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Cedric and I work with OCBC Bank. At OCBC Bank, my role is to mainly lead the digital marketing and to increase the digital footprint for OCBC in the region. As part of this, we talk to people of various segments, from Frank, which is the youth, right to the silvers, who are the post-55s. So how can digital enable all people of all ages reach their financial goals? I think that's my role in the organization.
Hi everyone, I'm Shanru. I'm one of the co-founders of Shopback. What Shopback does is that we're a one-stop lifestyle portal that powers smarter purchase decisions. We give cashback to our users when they shop at any merchants to us, like Booking.com, Lazada, and more. So very excited to be here today and learn more from everyone. Yeah.
Excellent. Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Kobe. I'm founder and CEO of a firm called 8 Inc. We're an experience design firm, global reach, probably best known for work with Apple and Virgin and many of the larger brands.
Excellent. Well, I'd always like to sort of set the stage as what digital native means, because I'm very familiar with the term, but it doesn't mean everybody in the audience is. Sort of, for me, we look generationally. I would call myself a digital immigrant, meaning I didn't get my first digital device, if you will. It was actually a pager, if anyone remembers what those are, when I was about 18, and I got my first laptop when I was close to 20. And I guess culturally, I don't know if this is, I'm 52, I don't care how old I even, doesn't matter to me. Anyway, so it's 30-something years ago. But I didn't have it as a teenager, and I didn't have it as a child. And now we have sort of generations that have grown up with technology, and it's all they know, where they would get a smartphone or an iPad around the age sort of 6 or 7. And now we have what I like to call digital ground zero, which means they walk up to the television and try to get it to move, right? That's all they know. And so for me, digital native is right in that, where they're sort of young enough, 5, 6, 7 years old, where it's probably most of this audience, where that's all they know is from a technology. And so selling to them is very different. So I'd love to hear sort of how you guys, anybody on the panel that'd like to start, how have you segmented the market potentially to the various kinds of personas or audiences you're selling to, and what you've realized from these digital natives that have made you do something different? Anybody want to try? Tim, you want to start?
Sure. we've encountered this from the perspective of universities coming to us and saying, we're investing millions of dollars in facilities, but we don't know if they're the right facilities. Will these digital natives really need or use the types of facilities for education that we're in the process of building? And I think one of the interesting aspects is the traditional digital native, they see technology as oxygen. There's nothing special about it at all. Things that are really interesting that we've seen in the research is things that are analog. The idea you can put a seed in the ground, put soil over it, and it grows into something is remarkable. So I think, it's interesting to see that perspective. Most people creating technology today went from a previous mode to the current mode. But when you start to look at people who've just grown up with it, it's not that special, and the value that you have to place on the experience becomes even more heightened.
King, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to come from a rather unconventional angle. So we actually started a business just about 3 months ago, helping individuals launch campaigns online. So we found a very early success with 2 YouTube celebrities, so to speak. Just within 2 weeks, they were able to sell some 200,000 ringgit, which is, how much is that? About 80,000 Sing dollars worth of merchandise online in 2 weeks. And we thought that, hey, we've hit a gold mine with this. So they were YouTube sensations, and they're rather young, and all their target audience are between the ages of 16 to 25 years old. And we thought we would replicate this with as many YouTube superstars as possible. But we realized that out of 10, only 1 of them survive or can make it. And what we did was we ended up shutting this entire business model down for the time being. And we really have to relook into the idea of how the digital natives, or rather the younger generation, actually purchase. Because it doesn't mean that if you're a YouTube superstar and if you're selling something, it would necessarily work. So yeah, I mean, that's my take on how we can communicate with the buyers and also the people, the content generators of today. I have more to add, but let's just.
Excellent. Parin, how about you? What, either one of you? How have you sort of segmented? Yeah, because what I think is interesting is many companies are struggling with how do they segment who they sell to. Is it by geography? Is it by race? Is it by religion? Is it by gender? Is it by age range? And I think those are big groups, because being a digital immigrant, even though I'm not a native, I'm very comfortable with technology. So do you cut me completely out of the equation if you just focus on a digital native, right? So how have you segmented the market?
It's quite interesting. So Airbnb is kind of seen as an internet company, but actually the bulk of the interaction takes place offline, in a kind of face-to-face interaction. And so we don't so much think about it as digital natives. We see the digital interaction as the small, like, start of a journey where people will interact offline and have kind of meaningful experiences together.
Yeah, and how about you?
Yeah, so at OCBC we have the luxury of talking to the entire population, right from what you call ground zero, right to the agent. But what we see is a shift. The shift happening is that more and more are getting digital native. So we wouldn't say that digital native only talks to the people who are very, very young. But to target those, to your question, do we segment them differently? Yes, we do. So for the millennials, for example, we created this entire segment called Frank, which reaches out only to the millennials and the new to workforce, who we believe behave very differently. And the product offerings, the entire gamut of banking which reaches to this to this group of people is completely different, which is thought of from a non-traditional perspective. At the same time, when we reach out to the different segments, such as young families, such as the slightly older, which are the 40s, 50s, we find that digital also they also embrace digital in a very native way. So the kind of products and offerings which we are developing for this group is making use of research and looking at how they are able to use technology from that perspective.
Right.
So right from the youth, where we have a digital-only service, to the middle and the upper ages where we have a digital hybrid model, is something which we need to embrace.
Well, and I don't want to not take this opportunity. We actually have somebody on stage who is one of the 30 under 30 in Asia for Forbes. So let's give her a hand, because that's a great feat. And I love the fact that it's a woman, which is even better. But so what do you think from a digital native perspective, right? Being one and being sort of a leading thinker and sort of from a business perspective, I know you're very wonderful about thinking about your team, but when you think about the company and going after, right, that digital native, how have you sort of oriented yourself from a go-to-market standpoint?
So I think we really try to understand where these digital natives mostly are online or even offline. So we take more on a channel perspective. So let's say digital natives, they're mostly going to be in school. So we do school activations. If they like YouTube, we try to make sure that we're there. So we try to understand their consumer patterns, both online and offline, and make sure that we are getting their eyeballs and getting the brand recall at places that they frequent, be it like a coffee shop in a school or be it on Facebook because they're always posting on Instagram and so on. So we do look at demographics, but we also understand for each group type of customers what kind of merchants they actually like to shop onto Shopback, and through that then we know better how to target them as well. Yeah.
So what do you think that we could learn from this generation of digital natives for the next one? Right? I mean, I think selling to digital natives, I worry, as I've said a couple times, that we focus on sort of the generational aspect versus comfortability with technology. And so as we have a workforce now that is spanning 5 generations, and as well you have people living longer, and so you may have an older generation that is getting more digital because they want to engage with their families, all the way down to education, and then in the middle, this sort of chasm of people who are sort of resisting technology and others who are really embracing it. What are you doing, across the various different demographics, if you will, to sell better to them? And how do you understand who they are and what they want?
I want to give a little bit more meat onto what I was trying to say earlier. It is the inavailability or the availability of the term hype. So I think that earlier I said that we had to shut down something that was working very well because we realized that with all the data that was collected and all the reasons that we thought people were buying, there was one that was very difficult for us to put a finger on, and that is hype. So I think a lot of these natives are buying because of hype. Like if they see something and if they want to jump on a hype train, that would actually make your product go crazy. Like the traction for it could be really, really great. So that's what
let me tilt a little to the Airbnb question, because often it's said that experience is becoming more and more the product. And so how do you shape that with these various, right? I want it all the time. I want to understand it, right? The experience that I have with technology and how I move myself on and off premise from a digital experience to a physical experience. How do you see that changing?
Yeah, so one of the things we really pride ourselves on is this idea of building a community of both hosts and guests. And what building a community allows you to do is get this constant feedback loop where we're getting real-time feedback from hosts and guests about what they want, but we're also able to test things very, very quickly in different countries with different segments. And so the flip side of that is like building a series of commodities, and that's not what we're really interested in doing. We want to give a reason for people to come back. We want to give them a reason to feel really invested in what we're building.
So how about you?
Yeah. So in terms of your question as to how are we preparing to work through and understand digital natives and sell to them not only now but in the future, in that context, it's all about making sure that what we are doing really works. And it's a process of iteration, because many times we find that we are not that we aren't able to get it right the first time, but there are improvements required. Now in the case of a bank, there are many products which we can sell online, and there are many which require to be sold face-to-face at the branch. So how does that handoff happen in a seamless, in a way which doesn't give any pain point to the customer? I think those are the kind of experiences which we are working towards, because in the end, an experience, what you brought about as the experience of the entire digital cannot be made worse when they go into a face-to-face operation. So bridging that gap is one of the key experiences which we are working on, which makes that handoff smooth. At the same time, learning from what the customer tells us and putting it back, I think the idea of testing and learning is something which is constantly an iteration for us, which we need to keep on doing.
And so we've got some questions coming in. Thank you. So anybody else who's got questions for the panel, please put them up on Slido. But selfishly, I'm going to ask the one about what tools do you use. I'm going to self-plug here for a second. But I'm going to start on this side. And, what tools do you use to actually, keep in touch and understand what the wants and the needs of your customers are potentially, or your prospects and your customers? So I'm actually going to go down the line on this one. Let's start with you, Tim.
Yeah, I think, we use different types of assessment tools, but one of the things we try to do is recognize there's a relationship on the information that we get from installed knowledge and the information that is the future knowledge, and recognize that you need to work in both parts of that. The other thing is to recognize that to not be trapped in a kind of false polarity of digital versus physical. We're all here physically and we're all here digitally simultaneously.
Yes.
So the idea that if you're creating compelling, successful experience, it's recognizing that these are the tools that the end user has as the norm, and being able to recognize where there's an advantage to leverage one or the other types in the experience.
Excellent.
I think for Shopback, we actually use community as a way to also understand more about our customers. So we have a Facebook group where people are just free to talk about anything, give feedback about anything, get recommendations about anything. Sometimes they actually give some feedback about Shopback, but not all the time, and that's one way we try to understand them better. Use surveys as well, and something interesting for a digital company that we do is that we actually call up customers from time to time. So various members of the team, we actually go back old school style. We see numbers of certain customers that we want to find out more about. If they have a certain behavior that we want to understand, we call them up, ask them how they found out about Shopback, or what are the pain points, and we learn from there, give the feedback to the necessary teams, and I think that's a great way that we interact really very clearly with the customers as well to get very honest feedback.
Yeah, and that's a great piece of advice if you missed that, right? She was saying that they actually pick up the phone and call customers and ask them, because we don't want to over pivot to so much digital that you forget about the human side of it. And the greatest place to know what your customers want next, which is one of the other questions, is actually ask them the question. So
pretty similar actually. So what we do, we don't personally pick up the phone and call them, but what we try to do is we do formal researches. So we have brand tracks, because as a bank we offer multitude of products and services. So to get feedback, we tend to do customized researches ongoing. At the same time, when we have new products and services which are being offered to the market, we try to always test that with real customers to see the acceptance. So nothing beats talking to customers, and we also do find that talking to the frontline staff who are actually doing many of the selling does help a lot, because they get the real feedback as to, when they speak to them, as to the first-hand responses as to what the customers can tend to expect. So the selling staff as well as online researchers.
Yeah, and I think banking has unique challenges as well, right? Yeah. Especially regionally, you have you have masses in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities that are unbanked. You have generations in the digital native side that have never walked into a physical bank, right? Really difficult.
Yeah. A good ticketing software is Zendesk. Zendesk basically does all the pinging for you, letting you know who's talking to you, who you have to talk to. But what I personally like to use for my team is actually Facebook Messenger. So just listen to the customer, what they want, talk to them on WhatsApp. They keep it informal in a sense, and sometimes you get the best advice from there. And of course, I agree with everything that Shan has mentioned as well.
So we have a number of online and offline options. Online, if you've ever used the Airbnb product, every time you book a home or receive a guest, you actually get to leave feedback, and the same when you take an experience. So that's the kind of online measure. Offline, we do something that people might find interesting. We actually meet large groups of hosts face-to-face, and we hold host meetups. So just to give you a bit of context, we were in 10 cities about 6 months ago for Airbnb experiences. We're now in 50. We have a plan to get to 200 in the next few weeks. And so before we launch a new city, we'll actually gather the hosts on the experiences side and just have a Q&A session with them and teach them a little bit about what we've learned through building the business, but more importantly, get a sense from them of what they're proud of to showcase in their city. So some of these things are not necessarily that scalable, but the amount of rich data that you get is highly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think each of you have said something very interesting. You all honed in on this kind of communities angle, right? Creating these relationships, whether it's online and offline. And one of the questions is, how do you create this seamless experience between digital and the physical? And I think from a bank and and Airbnb perspective, that's probably the closest one, and education, I guess, on the same thing. So you just mentioned how you've done it. How have you guys done it on the banking side, sort of made this seamless? I do something online and then I actually want to physically walk into a bank.
So in this case, what we're doing is that we've embraced various tools which allow us to do that. So that with the advent of technology, we're able to close the loop pretty well. So one of the technologies that have worked very well for us to drive people down the purchase funnel, and it sounds very salesy, is the chatbot. So the advent of the chatbot, what we found was when we initially went out with a bot, it was more towards a servicing requirement, which meant we wanted to deflect questions, ask people to talk about their problems and give them solutions therein. But what we found was that it not only helped to drive down our call volume to the call center, but also was an effective way of getting leads and getting people to want to transact and want to do business. So what we find is that interaction and that element of bringing together technology with the customer experience helps to bridge that online to offline gap. Beyond that, we also tend to use technology to be able to stitch the requirements of what a person did online to when they walked in. So today at OCBC, if you fill up a form, if you tend to do in a certain action, when you walk into the branch, a person is able to take that experience of where you stopped off and use that to have a conversation with you. Things like this help to ease the seamlessness of what a person did online, and also elevates the customer experience. So this really helps in us creating the experience and making customers more loyal, as well as increasing stickiness with the brand.
Excellent. So one of the other questions here is, I'd like to understand from Shanru, I'd like to understand from you, sort of, what are you seeing, because I love the fact that you're speaking to customers, tracking them online, really looking at communities that are affecting their purchase decisions. What are the sort of one or two things you see that is affecting how they decide to actually buy in that digital native space?
I think definitely one important thing is convenience. I think the digital natives are quite a spoiled generation in the sense that everything gets them really, really fast. So we also have to understand how to deliver our services in the fastest way, bring them to what they want to buy at a particular merchant in the fastest way. So trying to step up a lot more in terms of personalization. If someone has already indicated that they like to visit a particular store like Foodpanda, the next time they log into the app, they'll see that as a recently viewed store, and it's easier for them to access that instead of having to browse through a usual user journey where we showcase maybe the popular brands. So trying to really use product improvements to make the whole experience a lot more seamless and basically fuss-free and faster for the digital natives. Yeah.
King, how about you?
Yeah, speed is of the essence. I think the other thing that is important is also trend recognition. We need to find a more consistent way to recognize trends. Well, you see, the thing about trend is it's inconsistent. We're going to find a way to make this inconsistency consistent. And the third thing is that we need to do a lot of very good packaging. So when speed, trend, and packaging comes together, I think that's what really entices and ignites the digital natives.
So one of the questions here is, what would you advise an organization who doesn't have any digital tools to collect data? I'm going to answer that one. There's a Salesforce booth outside. No. So besides us, what tools would you recommend sort of in capturing all these things? What are you using, King? What are you using to capture sort of customer information and then make the right decisions to be better engaged with your customers?
Yeah, well, we're just really listening to them and putting everything in Zendesk at the moment. But Salesforce works too.
I was kidding. Yeah.
No, but we're just really listening to them, and we're very selective with our information. They're very different from what Sean and I think the rest of these guys are doing. We want to be very selective because we want to understand where the next trend is. So it's a very unconventional approach, but I think it works. And every time, especially when we're dealing with the digital natives, once we hit that sweet spot, that X factor, you'll see like a windfall, and that's what we're doing. So we're not exactly collecting data like these guys are. We're not minting it. No.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, here's this one tool. It's going to be the holy grail. Salesforce is close, but I think the idea that depending on the problem, you're going to address your problem with some different tools. And in some cases, that's going to be tracking your customer behavior. In some cases, that may be facial recognition. It may be other technologies. But it depends on what our the kinds of things that you're looking for to understand. And so it's important to select the right tools based on your particular need, as opposed to looking for that sort of one holy grail.
Yeah, and I'd say that, minus the comment about Salesforce, that you have to use something. Whatever it is that you use, you have to use something. So what are you guys using?
We use a lot of stuff actually. So I think we have our in-house systems as well that captures customer data, what they're purchasing on, so we can make better recommendations. But in terms of more generic tools, we use like GA, certain tools to understand the community better on Facebook. So it really depends on what kind of data you're trying to track in the end. If it's more about your website, your traffic, what's the demographics of the visitors to your website, then GA might work, but it really depends what platform you're more interested in.
What about customer data?
Customer data, mostly our internal systems. We also use Responses as our CRM system to fire out newsletters and notifications to our customers as well.
Excellent.
At a bank, obviously, we have the luxury of a large customer base. So what we use for our customer base and use to monitor or to get all the transaction data is Unica as a CRM software. But beyond that, we tend to use a lot of different tools in the marketing stack for different reasons. For example, to merging data about customers, we use a DMP. Then we also use different tools for personalization as well in terms of the entire reach out. But to the point where we want to have customer data in terms of getting to know the customer and to understand the customer, we use third-party data sources, which is utilizing third-party data sources available off the internet, and we also do research. But speaking to customer is the best when we want insights, but data-wise and transaction data-wise, we use formal software sources like Unica and the others.
So I'm going to go to another one. How do digital natives shape out the future of e-commerce? I think this is a really rich question, because I think that now the expectations of all of us are expectations like we were a digital native, because we have speed that you've mentioned, right? The access via app or mobile, it's sort of anywhere, anytime, but we are still physical, but we have a digital personality, et cetera. So, what do you think is the best way to understand where you think the future is going to be? And in your case, it's not e-commerce in a product sales perspective, right? Yours is a community, but how do you think they're shaping? You're born in the fact that digital natives have made you very successful. So what do you think the next thing's going to be for you guys?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So there's 4 billion people in Asia Pacific, about 2 billion people online, 98% have a mobile device. I think we're all more connected than ever. There's people on their phones, there's people messaging, but I think people are increasingly quite lonely as well, because they might exist in an echo chamber, they might not have that much physical interaction. And so we can actually see this wave towards people getting sick of some of these physical devices and craving human interaction and going offline more. And so we really believe that people will be looking for people-powered experiences in that regard, and so they might use online to find and discover, but the actual experience that they buy into might actually be offline.
King, how about you?
I think it's super important to recognize that the digital natives are growing up, and it's about growing up with them. So going forward and sort of forecasting what is it that their buying patterns will be, and what is it that they will actually mature to become, and how their spending purchasing pattern would be when they mature as a functioning adult in the society, and then cater to them, grow with them. I think a lot of very established brands, they do the same thing. I remember when I was in school, Nike would set up this football trucks outside of my school, and I would go in and try the boots, and I've been a fan of Nike ever since. So I think it's going back to the basics of marketing and starting them young, plant the seed, and sort of let it grow and grow with it at the same time.
Tim, anything there?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The idea of recognizing the behaviors they're most naturally inclined to work with, and developing the types of interactions that make the most sense for that stage that they're in. One of our clients is Xiaomi in China, and we found that we have the ability to go through a full purchase process on mobile devices, eliminating POS completely in the space, but being able to do it in a way to where we're able to get insights into where people drop in or out of a conversation. And so it's giving you not only the receptors in the marketplace, but the intelligence that you're able to garner from those interactions help you make your product better.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to sort of ask everybody one last question, and I think, I'm a firm believer. Businesses do two things: they make things, they sell things. So, so let's talk about the sort of sell things side of that comment. And I'd like to have each of you sort of answer, what do you think is next for selling to and going to market and sort of acquiring, attracting, supporting, servicing, marketing to a group of customers who are more digitally inclined, right? So it answers a couple of these questions around, what's next for the hype, what's going to be next, what do we expect things to be looking like from a technology standpoint. So I'm going to start with you, Tim, and then we'll sort of wrap it up all the way at the end. But what do you think is next for selling to a digital native? Somebody who's really comfortable with technology.
Yeah, I think you go back and look at what's the most intuitive type of experience that you can create for that. I don't know if it's a trend per se as much as it is what good commerce has always been, but we have different tools now to enable those interactions. But I think it's important to recognize you have to come back to the fundamental human behavior. If you understand those interactions, then use the right tools to enable that.
Excellent.
I think for the digital natives, they're highly social creatures, and I think they don't like to be hard sold to. So I think what we need to do to better target this group is to focus more on providing useful content that they're willing to read about, and then maybe make a purchase if it's something that they feel is useful, or in terms of engaging them as a community to make them feel like they're engaged and they're wanted and the feelings matter, and then kind of selling them whatever they actually need instead of trying to create stuff and shoving it up their throats. Yeah.
Excellent.
Actually, I'd like to put on two things which were brought up. One is that experience, and the second is how they are spoiled for choice. So experience is going to be the key. At the same time, being spoiled for choice, the digital natives want things fast and quickly. So we believe at OCBC that ecosystems, companies collaborating to provide experiences together will be the future of how we will approach a digital native. No longer a company is going to be forced with be the only one offering certain products and services. But how can companies collaborate to provide those experiences? And banking is already moving in that direction, where you do see those collaborations happening, not necessarily with companies offering same products. So for example, OCBC said tied up with StarHub, a telco. Tomorrow we're tying up with a health chain, SMG. So there is companies coming up with solutions, and solutions is the key rather than products and services. Happening on the experiences, providing the right experience, at the same time giving people what they want fast and together as an organization, not one.
Okay.
I don't know, man. 2 years ago, it was reported on Forbes that there's this girl, she's 24 years old, she's Chinese, from China. She made it to the Forbes billionaire list just by being an online celebrity. So she sells stuff on e-commerce, right? And on a single day, there was another girl who made 246 million renminbi in a single day selling merchandise. So I think for me, I don't think I can forecast the next digital product, but I happen to be blessed with a younger brother who's in the audience right now. He's 16 years old. So whatever he buys or his friends are talking about, like, find your 16-year-old friends or your brother or your sister, hang on to them, and try to observe and see what is it that they need, and then just freaking sell it the next damn day.
That's the best advice I've heard.
There you go. All right.
We've been talking about this a lot recently at Airbnb around what do people really want, and what does a company that takes a really long time frame on things look like? And what we've learned is that obviously you want to appeal to your shareholders, but we also want to think about what stakeholders want, and what does the wider community want, and what are some of the trends that are going on in the world, and how can we play a role in some of that. So I guess the summary would be like taking a really long-term view on things and thinking beyond just kind of selling people stuff.
Well, and the opposite of what I've just asked is, what are the biggest challenges? The greatest challenges of actually selling in this new sort of always-on economy. What do you think the greatest challenges are we have to overcome? Anybody?
I think there's a lot of challenge around what is choice, and kind of, what we're finding with information is this notion of truth starts to come into play. So having choice and truth in a kind of open platform, you start to look at what filters you can use that enable a better outcome for yourself. And you see a lot of people struggling with too much choice, too many prices. I think there's a lot of what's represented just isn't forthright, and so you have to filter through some of that. I think that's
Excellent.
a big challenge.
What do you think the greatest challenge is?
I think it's really about getting people to understand what value you can add to them for your product or your service, and then also creating a wow experience for them, because I think, like what some of them have said, that experiences are really important now because so many people can do the same thing that you're doing pretty easily, for at least where Shopback comes from. So it's how we try to make sure we deliver the best experience to them, be it through customer service or giving them what they want in terms of the merchants that we can add value to them, and really listening to them and acting on whatever they think. Yeah.
Excellent.
In our case, the challenge is going to be delivering personalized experiences, because the digital natives of today want things unique to themselves. So finding scale in all these unique experiences is one of the challenges we are finding, because it's easy to provide products and services. Whether each of these will have scale is another experience altogether, and that's the challenge we are facing today.
King? Oh, all right.
I think for us, similar to kind of what Tim said, how do you keep up with what people want?
All right, well, great. Well, let's give a hand for our great panel this afternoon. And I think that's it for us, and someone else is coming up next, so thank you guys very much.
Thank you.